Benny Big Gun here. I'm coming at you all today with a video on my Browning Phoenix breakneck air rifle. You've seen me shoot this one in the past many years ago. Now for a few years I haven't been able to take care of this rifle the way I wanted to, so it's collected a fair bit of rust. I've completely stripped it down. So what I'm going to be doing today is cleaning off the rust and giving it a touch up, and as well as changing the spring. This is currently the 10 joule spring. It came with a 20 joule spring or 16 joule spring, I don't quite remember, which I never got around to installing. So I got it all complete disassembly. You can see it's got a fair bit of rust on the barrel and cylinder, which is unfortunate, but I'm going to touch it all up, clean it all up. Like I said, everything's stripped, safety is dismantled. So all that's left to do is to get the spring out and get to scrubbing and clean it up, oil it back up, and put it all back together with the new spring. So I'm not going to be doing a bunch of talking in this video. It's going to be small parts of me doing pretty much everything. Without further ado, let me get to it. I'll talk to you all. Alright, so got the spring out. I need an extra pair of hands to do it. Kind of MacGyvered it, don't have a jig, don't have the correct tools. It actually bent the crap out of the screwdriver. So basically, we held on the friction of the spring, because this is the safety housing. The safety housing was actually pinned in with the spring and the inner cylinder. So what had happened was, while he was holding pressure, I grabbed this makeshift punch right here, punched out the punch, and then proceeded to pull this out slowly. What ended up happening was the safety housing went flying like 10-20 feet across the place. Then very, very slowly let go of pressure off the spring, and then got the spring out. The spring is actually in great shape. It's not rusted at all from what I can see. It's actually still greased, in great shape. Anyway, I'm going to get everything cleaned up, get the other spring ready, and then I'll get... Alright, so what I'm doing here at this point is scrubbing the barrel down with a steel wool brush and some oil and soap mixture to get the rust off. Alright, so what I'm doing right now is because I'm sure some the water and moisture got in here from all the scrubbing. I'm going to go ahead and take my air compressor and blow out some of the air, some of the moisture that got in there. It's kind of tricky to do on camera. Alright, so now I'm lubricating the inner tube where the spring sits in. I don't know if it's the correct terminology, but just for easiness sake, let's call it the inner tube, which is also how the rifle is cocked when the cocking arm interacts with the inner groove. Alright, spring is finally in. Got the 16 joule spring in. Here's the old 10 joule spring. It was a hell of a job without tools. The correct tools, I mean. But, so what happened was, I did go to record it. The battery died, and I didn't notice it until it was over. So, as you can see, the safety housing is back on. Just held, everything is held by this pin here. The only tools we literally used 3 pairs of hands. One person to hold down the entire assembly like this with 2 hands. Then one person putting 1 screwdriver in, or we're using some of these pins, these hole punchers, which is laying around which you don't use, which actually got really bent. Then with a variety of screwdrivers. Pushing the spring down, putting another screwdriver on top, holding it, pushing the spring down, putting a screwdriver on top and holding it, and keeping on doing that until everything was in, and I put the safety catch back on top. That's what the third person was there for, to put the safety catch back on top, using a hammer to hammer the pin back in. But now the most difficult part of this is done. I've done cleaning most of everything, and some of the blowing was lost because of the rust. Eventually I'll be getting around to reblowing this, but the good thing is that most of all of the rust is gone. And put the barrel over here, same thing. I've just got to clean up the front side a bit. I've got a box full of small parts over here. I'm going to try to get everything recorded of me putting this thing back together, but apart from that, let me get back to it. Now it's time for the trigger installation. So the trick to this was to fold that small arm you see right there in between the groove, metal groove where it sits. It's kind of hard to tell on camera, but you gotta fold it and then push it in and lay the trigger down in the correct spot. It was quite tricky at first here, but at the end I got the hang of it. Next up was reinstalling the safety switch and bar. So you can see me installing right there that little inner tube, which has a hole at the back and two holes, one on the top, one at the bottom. The top and bottom holes is where the switch sits, and you got to put that in with the hole facing down. And then what I ended up doing is putting the button in and then hammering it down. Being careful not to hit it too hard to damage the plastic. Next up was reinstalling the security bar, which sits on that little stick that comes down from the safety button. So the trick here is to get that between the trigger housing and sitting on the switch. Now the switch with the stick in it had a slight recess almost where the bar would sit in, and then I had to push all the trigger pins to the side, as you can see right there, and then try and jiggle the bar in, which took some doing at first, but overall not the most difficult thing in the world once you get the hang of it. And once that's done, it's just a matter of pushing the pins back in place. Next up we have the cocking safety. So when the barrel is open, you can't pull the trigger. So essentially this rifle has two safeties. You've got the automatic safety at the back, which enables whenever you open the rifle, and then the cocking safety. So even if you do push the safety manually forward, you won't be able to pull the trigger, which would send the barrel flying closed if you did manage to do that. And if you had your hand in the way, it would not be good. That one right there needed to slide into the opposite side of the automatic safety bar. So I just had to push the pins to the other side, then slide that in and push the retaining pin in place to hold it down. And then you can see that little spring that's hanging down on it needed to be rearranged. And then afterwards we have I don't know what the spring is called. I could just call it a Y spring. It sits on the pin, as you can see right there. It locks into that little groove above the trigger, and then in that little hole, which my pointer will be heading to right now, right there. And that basically enables the automatic safety to have that spring in it. So that's what pushes it backwards and forwards. I don't know if I'm making 100% sense here. And right after that, I just have to push the trigger forward like so to make it sit in its housing. You can see those two bars, and there's one on that you can see right now, the other one on the opposite side. Next up was bolting down the trigger system, which was pretty easily done with that screw right there. That's actually a double threaded screw. It's threaded on both sides. Well, it's not threaded on both sides, my bad, but you thread it into that hole right there, and then it has screw grooves on the opposite side, which is where your rear screw on the stock goes. So the trigger is technically double bolted down, and there's a little nut that sits in that hole right there. That nut is actually what we needed to replace when the safety housing flew out. So that actually just sits in the bottom of the safety housing. It wasn't glued down or anything, so that's just a simple number 10 nut, which we easily replaced. Right here I was being careful not to tighten the screw too much as to snap the threading, because that would have been bad. It would have meant to complete this assembly again to replace the number 10 nut in the safety housing. And right here you can see the horse-shaped little clamps that sit on the pins. I did this off camera because it was extremely tricky to do, and I needed to get pretty close to see properly what I was doing. So as you can see, those right there just clamp onto those pins, preventing the pin from being dislodged out and having everything fall apart while shooting. Next up was barrel reassembly. I needed an extra pair of hands for this. I'm not going to show the whole thing. I did cut this clip a bit because it got quite extensive. But anyway, I needed to put 2 washers, a washer on either side that needed to be put back in, as well as the main barrel screw and the retainer screw to hold the main barrel screw in place. And here you can see the main barrel screw going in right there. And right now what I'm doing right here is just checking over everything, making sure everything works right. The trigger and the safety and etc, etc. And now I'm just lubricating certain parts right here on the trigger, and then I'll be moving over to the barrel because the barrel just got freshly reinstalled, so it did definitely need a recoat of oil. I'm using a Q-tip here to make sure I don't just pour oil straight into the trigger, because not everything needs to be lubricated here, just certain parts. It's not very good to have oil dripping out of your trigger. For a second there, I tried to put the trigger guard on the wrong way round, but corrected that error pretty quickly. So the trigger guard just slides on like that. Give it a good tap, and then it was in place, and it was just off to put the screws in. And you see that rear screw right there is the one that screws into that little double-sided bolt that holds the trigger assembly in place. And then the front screw is just a simple stock screw, short one. And now finishing off tightening everything down, now that all the screws are in place. Now next up, and the last part of the assembly, is reassembling the rear sight, which took me a few seconds to figure out how to put back on, and it was getting pretty dark outside, so that wasn't helping anything either. Alright, everything is back together now. If I've done everything right, I should be able to cock this and shoot, and I've got a few targets behind me. Alright, let's go ahead and shoot those targets. Go ahead and zoom in. Shoot the red can first. Got the red can. Bring it forward. Alright, so on the dog can, we've got entry, exit. Now the can when I'm hitting this can it's pretty thick, this dog food can. It's not even moving when I hit it, it just hits it and goes right through and out. These are thin Coca-Cola cans, so it's a different story. Taking quite a few shots at this. I don't know which one I just did. I know it aimed low. I'm pretty sure it was this one right here. And then entry. I think this one was the exit. But there you all have it. Hope you all enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. If you want to see more projects like this, let me know. Don't forget to like, favorite, subscribe. Most of all, have a great day.